Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Eastchester Union Free School District podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Blute. We are here today with an incredibly special new guest that I'm sure a lot of people are very eager to hear speak and very eager to get to know a little bit more about. He has been a tremendous addition to this school district, and some of you probably know him very well by now. Our new Eastchester High School Principal, Mr. Chris Welsh.
Thanks, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here.
As I mentioned to you prior, I do give everybody a shout out at the beginning of this podcast, but I have to give you a tremendous shout out where, you know, being in the building, obviously, right, we see things on the daily that the community wouldn't necessarily see or the parents wouldn't necessarily see. We had no idea what it was going to be like from the transition with, Dr. Capuano leaving for 21, 22 years. And when you came in, right from the first board meeting where you were introduced, we were super thrilled. We were so impressed with your brother already having been in the school district for a long time. This year, from, I believe it was Superintendent's Conference Day, where you were outside flipping burgers for the entire staff.
Yep.
Making sure everyone ate and was fed and whatnot, from what you've introduced to the faculty meetings, making sure that everybody checks in on one another, and et cetera. Your support for places like the Players Club, for all of athletics. I can safely say that I speak for everyone where, sir, you have passed with flying colors, and we could not be more truly honored to have someone like you with everything that you've done already for this high school and for this district.
I really appreciate that, Joe. Very kind words. And, so much of what you just said is really all about community. And that's the one thing that has blown me away about Eastchester. One of the reasons that I really was drawn to Eastchester, kind of, growing up in the area, knowing it pretty well, having a sense of the fact that people really pride themselves in the community here, but it's really even just blown me away to what degree community is really the emphasis in Eastchester. People really care about the place, they care about each other, they care about the kids, and it's just been wonderful. It's been a breath of fresh air in terms of just getting to know a lot of people and learning more. Very early on, I took the approach of hit the ground learning. And here we are in April, and I feel like I've got a pretty good lay of the land. And, it's a place that I'm really happy to be at. And
we're going to get into all of that. But what you just said, though, with the community, all of those actions have just perfectly, you've perfectly encapsulated what this place is, right? Because, again, you mentioned community, right? The word family is thrown around a lot. It is just a very tight-knit place where, everyone wants to be as personable as possible. And, yeah, you knew that from day one because all we have gotten is that sense from you. So it's very important that you demonstrated that.
It's who I am, right? It's how I was raised. It's fundamental to everything that I value is, you want people to leave every interaction they have with you feeling good about it. In the position of principal, sometimes interactions are difficult based on situations that you're dealing with.
Sure.
But even in those difficult situations, you want people to feel like they've been heard, like you really are considering their viewpoints. And I try to do that in all of my interactions.
And when you do. So thank you so much for all of that consideration and everything that you do. What you just mentioned, your background, you said that you grew up in and around the community. So please, for people who are seeing you for the first time or who want to get to know you a little bit more.
Yeah. So, I was a lifelong resident, grew up in Colonial Heights. So really 5 minutes away from here in Yonkers, went to Iona Prep. Grew up from the age of 13 to 18 playing many, many baseball games at Sagasi Field for the Eastchester Eagles, Concordia College as well.
What position were you?
I played, I was kind of like a positionless guy. I could hit, and I pitched. So when I wasn't pitching, I always found my way into the lineup, but sometimes I would play first base, third base, right field. Just, I always hit enough to be in the lineup, though.
Sure,
so that's
sure.
important.
And I'm sorry, just being the sports buff that I am,
Yeah.
when you did pitch, did you start or did you relieve, or at that level is it kind of all interchangeable?
I mean, my senior year at Iona Prep, I was a starting pitcher. But, in summer league, you kind of just fill in wherever. A lot of games where I've started, a lot of games where I've closed. But yeah, I spent a lot of time on the mound.
Awesome.
The bump.
So you're very experienced with what this place is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you've seen a lot of it. Is your brother older or younger?
My brother is older. Yeah,
Okay.
he's 8.5 years my senior.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. I didn't have your brother when I was in middle school. He was still here at the time. I was just on the opposite team. But I do remember he's a huge Mets fan.
Yeah,
and
as
you're
am
a
I.
huge Mets fan.
As
okay.
am I, yeah.
Is there anything else about your background that you would like to say that you feel that it's important for the community to know?
I mean, from a personal perspective, just grew up, I think in a house that instilled really strong values in me, prioritized education, the importance of education, but also just most importantly being a good person and being kind and making people feel good about themselves through their interactions with you. So, I mean, from a personal standpoint of my background, sports, of course, were really influential in my life, and I think that's why, I really understand how important it is for a lot of our high school students, not just sports, all of their extracurriculars, but, just having a place to shine and find your way and to feel good about yourself. So, from a personal perspective, that's really my background. From a professional perspective, my background begins with my journey at Pleasantville High School, where I started teaching and coaching in 2009. I started out as a special education / social studies teacher. I started early on doing the resource rooms and co-teaching, and then I kind of transitioned a little bit. I took over the AP government program and was really proud at the time of how I grew that from like one section to 3 sections, all the while taking on more and more leadership positions. Sure. Actually, a teacher at Pleasantville is a community member in Eastchester, and I ran into him at a soccer game early on when I got here, and he said, I knew this was going to happen. He said, as soon as you started, you were always at the faculty meetings presenting, and it was something that I enjoyed. I continue to enjoy, obviously. But, took on more and more leadership roles at Pleasantville, ultimately became what was called the curriculum coordinator, which led me to do a lot of work around new teacher training, professional development. I explored block scheduling there. We did a lot of work around active learning spaces with flexible furniture. And I did that as a stipended position while still teaching and coaching for about 5 years. And then in my last year at Pleasantville, I came out of the classroom altogether. Sometimes smaller districts get creative in how they staff positions. They kind of created a role for me. It was called the Director of Student Services, where in a small district with only one assistant principal, it was a way to kind of tap into me as a third administrator on the team, while still being a part of the teachers unit. And I was there for 9 years, and then I left to become the assistant principal for academics and operations at Scarsdale. And I was there for 6 years, just up the road, very close. And that was a tremendous learning experience, just working with really great people. A lot of innovative new instructional practices. Kind of on the front edge of a lot of educational initiatives there. Yeah. Really fortunate to have worked for a principal who was fantastic, a gentleman named Ken Bonamo, okay. Who was a great mentor and really has become a very close friend. But in my time at Scarsdale, as assistant principal for academic and operations, I built the master schedule. I oversaw transcripts, grade reporting. I oversaw the department chairs, worked very closely with them, on curricular and instruction initiatives. So not necessarily the typical assistant principal role where you're managing the day-to-day of discipline and attendance, right. But really a role I think that prepared me probably more so than a traditional assistant principal role to take on the principalship.
Just out of curiosity, was it always in the back of your mind? I mean, going back to Pleasantville now, was it always in the back of your mind to become a principal, or did that just kind of happen over time where the natural born leader was within you, and then over time it just clicked, or was that kind of the goal from the beginning?
Joe, I think I can point to a couple of things. Like, certainly some of it I think is just inherent in who I am, and I do like to lead and lead by example. But when I was at Pleasantville in my first 5 years as a teacher, obviously really formative time as a new educator, I had 4 different principals. We had an interim from a retirement. We had a principal who was there for 2 years, didn't work out. We had another interim, and then ultimately they hired, the gentleman who's still the principal there today and is a friend and a mentor as well. And in that time, more and more I kept finding myself thinking about, wow, like it's really a incredibly important role. You always think, oh yeah, the principal, of course it's going to be important. But when you see kind of a lack of continuity in the role of principal, you see the impact it has on a school, and most specifically, I think, on the school culture. So during that time, I started to think about it more and more, and that's when I started my administrative master's degree and the certification process. But, again, I think really from the get-go, I always found myself very comfortable talking about teaching and learning and assessment. A lot of times teachers are a little hesitant, right? Because if you're having conversations about your practice, sometimes it could feel a little bit like someone is, questioning or devaluing what you're doing. And it's not really about that. It's about having open and honest conversations so that everybody a part of those conversations can grow.
Well, I want to expand on that because that's a great segue, and this is why I really do enjoy this, because the conversation does go, and I mentioned this to you, the conversation is going to evolve into what it's going to be. Yeah, so when I first got back here, when I went into Jeff's office because he was my principal when I was a student, and he was on the phone, and it had to do with something regarding discipline stuff. And he hung up the phone and he looked at me and he just said, "I feel like a cop." And outside of the discipline, which I think everybody is aware of, what are you overseeing on the day-to-day from a yearly perspective? Because I do feel, I've been in show business my whole life, and people always ask me, they're like, what does a producer do? And I try to explain it to them because no one really knows. And I almost feel like a principal is a little bit of that type of job too, where you're doing so much, but people might be in the dark about what it is that you're tackling on the daily.
Yeah, look, I don't think any principal is going to tell you they enjoy the discipline aspect of the job. It's not, something that we really relish having to deal with. But by nature, we're in high school, we're dealing with adolescents. Their brains are still developing. Rational thought is not always their strong suit. So these are things that we have to deal with. But again, I'll just go back to that idea of even in those difficult situations, you want to help students, help families, view it through the lens of kind of like a growth opportunity, to understand like, look, we get it. You're a teenager. Sometimes you make mistakes, but how are we going to get better? How are we going to grow? How are we going to develop into the type of person that we can be proud of into our adulthood, beyond our years at Eastchester High School? But, just in terms of, so unfortunately some of the day-to-day of that stuff, gets in the way of the bigger picture work. But I'm really proud about a lot of the things that we've done this year. Again, it's all about building a culture where we're comfortable having conversations, honest and open, about our instruction and assessment practices. You referenced a little bit earlier some of the work we've done at our faculty meetings. I like to emphasize through my observations, which again is another big piece of the job, is observing teachers and being in classrooms and giving them feedback. I like to emphasize in my observations and in a lot of conversations the idea of what I call LATIC, and it's a research base methodology, but it's LATIC, Learner Active Technology Infused Classrooms. And I really believe that students learn best by doing. I've said this to a few people recently. When you're going through your teacher preparation programs, they ask you all the time, what's your philosophy of education? And how can you really know? Because you haven't taught. So you do the research, you find some stuff, you write a 3-page paper on what your philosophy of education is. But until you live it, you can't really have a true philosophy. At this point of my career, having done it for 15 years, and thinking more and more about it, my philosophy really boils down to what I just said. Students learn best by doing. So we've done a lot of work, had many conversations about this idea of a learner active technology infused classroom. So at each faculty meeting, we've installed kind of a new segment called a teacher feature, where we have a willing volunteer from the faculty who gets up there and shares an innovative instructional practice that they found to be effective with students. So they do a little 10-minute presentation on this instructional practice. We break up into interdisciplinary groups, have a discussion about how that might translate into the respective department areas. So just that little structure, I think, has facilitated good conversation in that regard.
Sure.
And again, just trying to create opportunities for interdisciplinary conversation in general at those faculty meetings. Right now I'm doing quite a bit of work on the rollout of a potential proposed new schedule for next year. You nod your head. So that's taken up quite a bit of time just to be really thorough in, rooting a schedule in research and not just trying to put something together that we think's going to work, but we know it's rooted in the research. And then, any schedule change, you can go to any number of high schools that have undergone the change process with the schedule. There are always going to be issues that have to be rectified. I don't want to say obstacles that have to be overcome, but issues that you've got to, kind of shore up before you can really implement. So just really being thoughtful and trying to be detail-oriented and collaborative in working through those issues to make sure that, we can put in place a schedule that best supports student learning in a 21st century environment where rote memorization is no longer a thing, right? You've got all the information in your pocket. You don't need to remember, the Magna Carta or something like that, right? You can get access that so quickly. So it really has to be an emphasis on skills, skills that are transferable, ones that you build in the classroom, but then that you can bring outside of the classroom to make you a successful, individual beyond high school.
You went into a lot of philosophy with what it is that we're doing, which is really, really awesome. Are there any other initiatives that you have initiated or continued to spearhead in your first year here that you feel the community should know about?
Yeah, it was great work that began before I got here, but certainly we've expanded enrollment in terms of our AP and honors level courses. We're continuing to do that, not only in terms of how many or which students are participating in those classes, but also adding some new offerings. Mm-hmm. So for next year, we've added a number of new course offerings that I think are really exciting in terms of AP macroeconomics, AP seminar, which is a part of a 2-year capstone program within the College Board. The first year is AP seminar, the second year is AP research, and then you get a capstone designation as an AP scholar. We've also added, I think, really important courses in our business department. Specifically, one course is called Virtual Enterprise, and basically students run a business as the class.
Oh, wow.
And they have a fully functioning online economy, and there's competitions against other schools, and there's conferences and summits, and students go down to the Javits Center and have a booth and try to really pitch their product.
But this is a class that's going to take place next year?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So we did a little bit of work to adjust our career in financial management class, CFM, which is popular again in the business department, to really a focus on personal finance, which is something I think that students these days really benefit from.
You know, when I was a student, I always felt that there weren't enough of those classes to prepare you for what you were going to actually experience in life. But, you know, from what I see now and from what's being introduced, you know, it's certainly happening.
Look, I think the interesting thing is, you know, we don't know what jobs these kids are going to have, right? I mean, the level of advancement in technology that we've seen over the last 5 years is comparable to probably the previous 50 years.
Yep.
Just the rate of change is so dramatic right now, which again, you know, argues for focusing on skills that are transferable and, you know, are based in collaboration, communication, research, critical thinking, and analysis, instead of just saying, okay, let me memorize these 8 facts, go take a multiple choice test, and be on my way.
Let me ask you this question. How, and you could even get into your personal philosophy of it, how do you see most efficiently that rollout taking place for students to be, you know, learning more skills, you know, doing more work that will pertain to possibly what they will go into, you know, moving away from the model of just memorizing, you know, facts and whatnot, because it's almost like it's becoming a completely new model. What is your philosophy for how that can be rolled out as efficiently as possible?
Look, I mean, it's an iterative process. It's a long process. Kind of, you know, the approach is slow is steady and steady is slow. You know, because it takes work, right? And there's a lot of great things going on at Eastchester. I'm blessed to come into a place with great teachers, you know, and for the most part, really motivated students. So we're really fortunate in that regard. But just kind of every chance we get to have those conversations around rooted in teaching and learning, right? And think about, okay, you know, I like to think of lessons in terms of like chunks, right? You can't get up there and think you're going to just have 40 minutes. You're going to do the same thing for 40 minutes. You know, that's not really beneficial for kids. So I think you can look at it at the micro level in terms of how you structure a class period. You know, and I believe strongly that there should be kind of an opening piece, you know, some direct instruction, and then some applied practice, whether that be collaboration, conversation, lab work, you know, analytical writing, whatever it may be. That's kind of the micro piece of what a classroom experience can look like. And then the bigger piece is obviously the curriculum, right? What we're going to teach, the courses we're going to offer, you know, scope, sequence, you know, science department doing great work with the new next generation standards, you know, things of that nature. I would be remiss if I didn't, you know, tout the real, I think, I don't want to say explosion, but, you know, success of our computer science program, and we've done some work to open up new pathways. You know, part of that is obviously kids are more interested in that work because they see it as part of their future. But a big part of it, and I'm blessed to kind of just stay out of the way, is that we have Manny Suriel, you know, who's just a total superstar. And, you know, when you've got talent like that, sometimes it's best just to stay out of the way and let them do what they need to do. So, you know, conversations about a new course in data structures there, conversations about opening up pathways for students to take some AP computer science courses earlier in their career, and then get to even a higher level with the data structures. So,
well, yeah, I have to say, so we are on a wavelength of synchronicity right now, because right before I got here, I just made public an event highlight where Emmanuel Suriel had a hackathon 2 weeks ago, 2 Saturdays ago, and I filmed it for an event highlight, and it's incredible. Please check out the video. It's exactly what the principal is saying. It's honestly, it's indescribable what he's doing and what the curriculum looks like, to the point where, you know, being there and observing it and watching it, it's a little freaky.
It's out of my league, that's for sure.
It's like this is high school now, where kids are. But no, it's to your point. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening, and that's a great approach, though, right? You just want to be diligent with it, and because it's like in a way, education's being overhauled.
Yeah, and look, a lot of tried and true methods are still effective, right? And the reason we'll never see the profession of teaching be eliminated for AI is because so much of teaching is that human touch. It's about developing relationships. That's really at the core of strong teaching, is the ability of teachers to develop those relationships with kids so that they can see their potential, that they can be inspired to do all these great things. So again, we're really fortunate that we have a lot of teachers that do just that and are there every step of the way for our students. And you're
the one guiding it and navigating it.
I try. Just to circle back, when you were talking about like initiatives, and I went and I spoke a lot about curriculum and instruction and teaching and learning. Something else that I'm proud of that we've done this year is I think we've done a great job highlighting, celebrating our student success outside of the classroom. Certainly we've, just today we had an in-school pep rally, right? This is our third in-school pep rally of the year. I firmly believe that our student athletes deserve to be recognized in front of their peers, just like our scholars are recognized in the classroom every day.
Sure.
We've done great work around, having winter concerts and chorus and band, jazz co-performances. So, all of that I think is really, really critical to a school. You can't have kids be successful academically if they don't feel connected to the place.
Absolutely.
And extracurriculars go a long way in doing that. We've also had our first winter dance that, I don't know the last time there was a dance here, and it was great. It was, an opportunity for kids to have positive socialization, and that's exactly what it is. They were here having fun. They feel comfortable in this place, in this space. It's home for them, outside of their own home. Sure. So again, just kind of bringing it all together in terms of a community, has been something we've worked real hard at.
Well, and you have succeeded. So I can piggyback off everything that you said as someone who has seen all of it from the peripheral and seen it firsthand as well. Because that's always, I think, right, sometimes like change frightens people where, someone new is coming in and we don't know what it's going to be like, and et cetera. Yeah. And I can say firsthand from everything that I've seen this year, we haven't skipped a beat. And if anything, things have, with what you said, continued to grow. Regarding the pep rallies, I have never seen 3 pep rallies in a year where everything has been packed and everyone has been so enthused. So I think moving it into the day was an absolute home run. And, when you move it into the day too, going into it, you think, well, it's in the morning, or the kid's going to be groggy, or are they going to be up for it? They have been completely bought into it. So those have been resounding successes to honor all the student athletes and with the band playing. They've been tremendous. As someone who runs an extracurricular with the High School Players Club, we have still been able to continue going above and beyond and raising the bar in your first year. Mm-hmm. So we are very well aware of that, and we thank you for all of your efforts.
Yeah, I love attending. I try to get to as many events as I can. I try to be a public presence here. I think that's important. But more than anything, I enjoy seeing our students do so many amazing things.
Right.
Rock Against Cancer, the performances were amazing. Yeah. So I'm excited tonight to see Guys and Dolls hit the stage.
You are in for a big treat.
Yeah,
it's
I look
really
forward
special.
To it.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, lastly, but also the forum, because you mentioned it. So the night after the forum, we had rehearsal, and there was a tech build day in the auditorium, and I was talking to one of the students, and he looked really tired. So I said to him, "Oh, you're really tired today." He's like, "Yeah, it was a big night last night." And I'm like, "What did you do? What happened?" He goes, "We had the forum." I'm like, oh, you went? He's like, yeah, we all went. And and again, being the first event, I don't know what's going on or what it was like. And I asked him, did you enjoy it? And he said, it was incredible. So from the first hand from the students.
Yeah, they're great. They amaze me every step of the way. Sometimes every step removed from the classroom, you get a little further away from the students. But, I've been fortunate where I've had the opportunity to really connect with a lot of kids here and just, they're amazing.
Yeah.
That's why we're in this business is to work with kids and to support them, not just academically, but holistically so that, you see them smile. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And Ben, you mentioned too what you just said. You have the care, you provide the support, and that's very important for this community and the school district. You're at all the events. I remember you were at the first varsity hockey game this year. You were telling me. So, that does not go unnoticed, and that's just so important. So, we're thrilled and
Thank
honored
you, Joe.
that you were here.
I appreciate it.
The schedule.
Yeah.
So I know there's been a lot of back and forth. I know it's a hot topic right now and within the school district and in the town. What would you like to say about the schedule right now in order to clear the air possibly on maybe something that parents or students are unaware of, or if it's just where it's within the process? Kind of what do you want to say with it right now?
Yeah. I'm not sure when this is going to, be published. But today's April 4th and April 8th, I'll be presenting at the board meeting. Look, it was clear to me through my hiring process that a revamped high school schedule was a priority of the board. So that never came as a surprise to me. And given my background in scheduling, it was work that I really embraced and was excited for. I continue to be excited for it. I guess what I would say about the schedule, it's been a bit unfortunate that some of it has kind of leaked out and we haven't been able to provide the necessary context in something that's complex and nuanced and has a lot of different elements that need to be explained.
Oh, yeah.
So I look forward to the opportunity to do that at the board meeting and any forums or conversations thereafter. But everything that I do, students are going to be at the center of it. So, look, I think a traditional 9-period schedule is limiting in a lot of ways. There's always something to be said for consistency and structure, but if we want to support the many initiatives that we envision as beneficial for students, you need something that's a little bit different.
Okay.
So I think if you look at the research, certainly periods that are longer than 40 minutes, provide for deeper learning opportunities and some more of that experiential learning. Now, again, the schedule proposal is very much rooted in the feedback that we heard from parents and students. It is not an 80-minute block. We're looking at 50-minute periods. And I'll tell you, Joe, I would say 8 out of 10 lessons that I observe, I leave saying they could have used 10 more minutes.
All right.
And really because a lot of the good work has begun with teachers in chunking those lessons to have an intro, to have some instruction, and then allow for applied concepts. But then they don't necessarily get to have the full discussion and closure piece that I think is really important for students to not only summarize the lesson but frame for the next lesson. So that's just one piece of it. The idea that the periods are going to rotate, that's based in research on circadian rhythm, that adolescents especially experience different things differently at different times of the day. Sorry to say the word different 3 times in one sentence. But so there's always going to be a different experience first period, right? When you're a little groggy, just waking up, right?
Sure.
Versus how you experience a class third period when you're really getting into the groove.
So I understand it. So there's a kid that can have English first period, and then if the schedule is circulating, the next day he can have that eighth period.
No.
Okay.
Not eighth period. Because the way that we've arranged this is that there are morning rotations and there are afternoon rotations.
Okay.
And, I don't want to get too lost in the weeds here because really without visuals, it's a little tough to follow.
Of course, yeah.
But you could have a class that would meet Monday first period, Tuesday second period, Wednesday third period, not meet on Thursday, and then again on Friday second period, because the easiest way to say it is it's a rotating drop 4 schedule. So classes will meet 4 times a week instead of 5. And again, there's morning rotations and afternoon rotations. What's important about that is having them delineated morning and afternoon allows students to continue to participate in the BOCES program.
I see.
Right? Because you can get all your academics in the morning,
right,
and they can rotate within the morning, and then you can still leave here around 11:30 and participate in the PM BOCES program.
And again, I'm the ultimate bystander when it comes to asking these questions. I mean, I don't have a horse in this race, but just trying to understand it because I know, how
right.
important it is.
So I think if we want to talk about the research-based elements of the schedule, certainly, deeper learning, circadian rhythm, the need to embed social emotional learning program within a schedule. This schedule would provide for an advisory period. It would also allow for 1 period, a cycle of office hours. So another piece there is it really, I think, it has layers of college preparation embedded in it, not only for the office hours model, which students will need to take advantage of in college, but colleges don't have a daily class meeting schedule, right? They're non-daily. They're either 2 or 3 times a week. The 3 times a week classes are usually 50 minutes. The 2 times a week are usually an hour and 15 minutes.
Okay.
So we view a 50-minute period as a developmentally appropriate step towards the length of what a college class would be. Not all the way to the 75 minutes, but, kind of easing kids in with the 50 minutes.
Oh, of course. So it's like this precursor for what kids are going to experience when they do go to college.
Yeah, a taste.
And you did actually point out, like, with what I was going to ask you next, where the data points from the circulatory schedule, if you could just tell me a little bit more, like, what they are. Have you, from the research and the data, have test scores gone up with this? Like, what the deepening of learning, how has that been measured, if you will, for schools that have this?
Sure. I think the majority of schools would tell you that they are able to provide students with richer, deeper, more experiential learning experiences. I can't cite data on test scores. Quite frankly, test scores are important. We all know that, but to me, they're not the end-all, be-all. It's more about providing students with deep learning experiences that will translate to developing skills that extend beyond high school. Okay. I can rattle off, half a dozen, area schools that have moved away from the non-traditional model, places like Bronxville, Scarsdale, Rye, Byram Hills, North Salem, Horace Greeley, Croton Harmon. There's
Almost
a lot
all
of them.
Yeah.
I mean, there are very few schools left with a traditional 1 to 9 model in the area.
Gotcha. What are the issues that you're currently working out for this to happen?
Yeah, I think, very early on we said, this is the aspirational schedule. I don't like to use the word obstacles, but issues that needed to be resolved. Making sure that we could continue our BOCES programming, certainly, right? Developing an advisory program, not in terms of what's going to be taught, but making sure it fits within the teacher's contract. Those are 2 things that I think we've addressed and have, come to a positive resolution on. 2 issues that remain certainly are shared staff and shared space, because if you're going to have rotating periods at the high school and not have rotating periods at the middle school, that becomes difficult. In terms of the shared staff, I think we've got a fix for, I'll say, 60% of the 5 shared staff members, so 3 of the 5. There's a couple that we're still working through. We're being thoughtful, we're being diligent, trying to be as collaborative as we can, not only with district leadership, but with teacher leadership as well.
And you have been too. Again, another thing that I've heard through the grapevine in the building, the teachers, not all of them, but some of them that you're, working that out with. I've had conversations with them and they've said, they're meeting with you. There's also been walkthroughs with, I believe, the Board of Education to this point, and so everyone is really hands-on deck problem solving. And I do think that's important for people to know, because it's a big change, but you certainly have taken on the responsibility.
Look, I think the more that we are able to go back to why, right? Simon Sinek, start with why, right? Very, his golden circle of why. Organizations that are effective establish why they're doing something before they do it. We have certainly done that, I believe. There is clear research and motivation behind what we're doing. It isn't just a whim to say, oh, we got a new schedule. It really will have positive benefits on students.
With whatever happens with it, it still is in my opinion, a great forward way of thinking to, again, how to continue how education's going to, just move into the 21st century and be more beneficial for everybody.
We're a quarter of the way through, Joe. We got to start thinking.
Right.
Got to start thinking about the 22nd century,
which is crazy. And when I had Rob Jacoby on, when I had Dr. Meyer on that podcast, I still need to edit because it's a couple episodes, but they both said that too. Yeah, which is crazy to think.
We're a quarter way through, so we got to stop saying 21st century 21st century learning, and think we're almost starting to prepare kids for the next one.
That's wild to think. Is there anything else that you would like to say on this episode?
No, just that, I'm thrilled to be a part of the community. I've had, I think, a really positive first year. Yeah. It's amazing that it's April already.
I can't believe it either.
It's when you think back, when I think back to Superintendent's Conference Day, flipping burgers, it feels so long ago, but then at the same time, it's kind of like the days are fast and the year is slow sort of thing.
Right. Yeah.
But we're here and we're almost through a first year, and I look forward to many more.
This was a great conversation, a very important conversation because we touched on so many really good topics. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. My pleasure. Appreciate you having me.
Of course. And I couldn't agree more with your first year. We all sleep very easy at night knowing that you're here. So,
appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right.
See you on the next episode.